Welcome to Bed Crime Stories Podcast. I'm your host, T. To my loyal listeners, I hope you're all having a great day. To anyone new here, a warm welcome. Thank you for checking out my channel. Do me a favor, if you enjoy this video, smash that like button and consider subscribing. Also, if you want to hear me talk about true crime using the words that say it like it is, you know, the M word, the S word for unaliving, then please consider a membership or a Patreon membership. If I can get enough of those, then I don't have to rely on the ad revenue, and you can get tea of bed crime stories uncensored. Now, with all that out of the way, let's dig in. When 12-year-old Polly Klaas went missing on October 1st of 1993 from her bedroom, her father and mother suffered through 2 months of a cocktail of fear, anger, and hope. On the night Polly vanished, she was having a slumber party with 2 of her friends when a scary man broke in and used a sharp object to silence the girls and threaten their lives. Polly's family spent 65 days searching for her before learning that a recidivist violent offender who had been recently paroled had taken Polly and done her in within 2 hours of her abduction. The monster had told his fellow inmates in prison that he would avoid AIDS by getting a, quote, young one. His name is Richard Allen Davis, and thankfully he's sitting on death row in San Quentin. Polly's dad, Marc, said he spent those 65 days before learning his daughter's fate as a very frightened person. Frightened not for himself, but instead for his beautiful daughter. He would later say that he would tell anyone who would listen that he had a good chance of bringing Polly home alive. He clung to that hope. Then, at around 5 p.m. on December 5th of 1993, the Petaluma Police Department called Marc Klaas in to talk. They also called Marc's ex-wife, and she went down to the station as well. The cops had tears in their eyes when they told the parents Polly had been recovered, but she wasn't alive. Klaas said that his ex-wife broke down in tears, but he was rather emotionless. He just thought, well, this is the end of the game then. We'll just sort of absorb it, end quote. Marc and the family then went to their home, and about 3 hours later, Marc suddenly was hit by the enormity of the news. He said he went from being this passive, docile guy in one moment to a raving lunatic in the next. He grabbed things. He broke things. He screamed as loud as he could. Klaas said it was the saddest night ever. After that, the family left the home in Sausalito and went to stay at his sister-in-law's home. They couldn't go back to that home in Sausalito, the home where they heard the news that shattered their lives. So they stayed at the sister-in-law's house for 6 months. Eventually, when the brother-in-law said, "You guys have a home, it's time to go," they did return to their home. Marc said that they used money raised to help with searches for Polly to start an organization in her name. People sent the family tons of poems, gifts, songs, and other mementos, and this stuff meant a lot to the family. And while some very close friends remained close, others disappeared. The ones who disappeared had a hard time acknowledging Polly's death. Even some family members pulled away from Marc and the rest of the family. Were they afraid that this evil that had harmed the Klaases would then turn to them and hurt them in some way? Or were they just uncomfortable with what had happened and unsure what to say to the Klaas family? Marc Klaas was very public when Polly went missing. He spoke to the media, and he said the media was very helpful in trying to find Polly and bring her back home. He also said he never shed a tear in public. Only at 35,000 feet in the air in an airplane would his steely facade melt and would his tears finally flow. For the first year after Polly's death, Marc said he could not be alone. And he said the worst times were always the nights when the lights were finally turned off and there was nothing else to do but think. Marc said that he suffered long-term sadness along with anger for the unfairness of it all. He said that the fear he felt for the first 65 days within 24 hours of learning Polly's fate turned into unmitigated anger. He said he howled at the moon for years. At some point he realized that there were 3 fundamental ways to approach this type of situation. 1, you can succumb to depression and or using drugs or alcohol and eventually self-destruct. 2, you can turn away in denial and get on with life trying to pretend it didn't happen. Or 3, you can find some form of fighting back. Marc decided to fight back. He said he moved forward with purpose. Here's what Marc says he tells parents of other missing children. Quote, "I'd talk about the fact that everybody does things differently. That's absolutely true. We all have to find our own way. But I think one commonality that I found is that the desperation doesn't go on forever. For instance, I was a desperate man. I was a desperate man from the minute the phone call came in that Polly was missing for probably the next 8 years. And I was desperate in every aspect of my life. I was desperate to hold my child. I was desperate to talk to her. I was desperate to beat the brains out of the fellow who took her. I was desperate not to be alive myself. I was desperate to turn back the hands of time. The desperation is there, and it's something that one has to deal with. As a result of being desperate, you can't enjoy anything because there's too much frenzy. Everything is crazy. And if you do enjoy something, you feel guilty enjoying something, so you get desperate about enjoying something. I mean, it's this vicious, horrible circle. Then what happened after 7 or 8 years was that we realized that we could begin to enjoy things, that we weren't nearly as desperate anymore, that there were beautiful things in life, that we wouldn't have to see people enjoying themselves and say, "What's wrong with them? Don't they get it? What are they laughing at?" End quote. By the way, Richard Allen Davis remains on California's death row in San Quentin. He's one dude I think they should have gotten rid of a long time ago. I wanted to share a little about Polly's case today to say that most parents of missing kids are teary and emotional after the child disappears. But Marc Klaas's story seems better suited to saying some kids go missing from their bedrooms and not all parents act in the same way. While we would expect them to cry, there are times when the parents of missing kids don't cry publicly. And it doesn't automatically mean that those parents have something to do with their child's disappearance. It pains me to say that because I do feel that Sebastian's mother should be crying and pleading for the public to look out for her son. But perhaps she's crying in her pillow at night. We don't know. But just as I find myself saying that maybe Katie's not somebody who cries in public, I'm also saying, why was a new bed and mattress delivered to the Proudfoot home after Sebastian disappeared? We know that he was a bedwetter. We know that Chris Proudfoot allegedly had a problem with smelling urine in the house. One of the Proudfoot's neighbors allegedly said that Sebastian was indeed sleeping in the garage. And now we see an image of the Proudfoot's garage. One of the garage doors has a large dent in it, a dent that looks like it came from the inside out, as in someone or something hitting the door from the inside of the garage, pushing the metal outward. With all this talk of the garage, the mattress in the garage, Sebastian sleeping in the garage, and now a dent in the garage, seems like the garage is becoming an important location. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. And I'll see you next time on Bed Crime Stories.